Welcome to the Next Level Podcast, powered by San Manuel, a series connecting you with the best minds in casino, hospitality, tribal government, and beyond. Enjoy the show.
Joe McGinley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm so honored to have you on the show today. You know, our show and our platform is really about helping people on their career paths. And the goal is, you know, for the guests to give maybe an insight or two for them to help them in their career. And you're the perfect person to have, the co-founder and senior coach at 3-3 Communications. You came and spoke to some of our people at San Manuel, and we got such great feedback. So we're like, you know what, we should do a podcast. And here we are. So just to start, thank you for taking the time today.
My pleasure. I loved working with the group. I was energized for days afterward.
Yeah, and there's so many good insights during your session. So hopefully we could pick at them today. But for those who are not familiar with you, we always like to start with the origin story for the speaker in their own words to kind of give the 2 to 3 minute, as we call it, the origin story of, you know, where you grew up, how you got into the expertise that you're in, and ultimately what you do today. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your story, please.
Sure. Well, I was born in Chicago. At that point, we lived in the city with all our relatives, and I just had an early beginning of being around relatives and crowded around a table, everyone sharing stories and laughing a lot together. When I was around 5, my parents decided to move to Colorado, and we moved to a forest. No neighbors, very isolated. It's such a stark difference in my life from all the people to suddenly just me and my books. Mm-hmm. I feel like that pretty much tells the story of me, where I am an introvert and an extrovert, and they battle each other out. I love my alone time to go inward and observe. I love connecting and communicating with people. I need to feed both sides of me. When I'm in the communication state, what helps me really connect is I love everyone. I'm so curious. I can't wait to hear people's stories and actually meet people. That's been a through line throughout my life. I didn't always know I was going to end up doing what I do. For a long time, I was an actor in San Francisco and then here in Los Angeles. I loved being on stage, not alone though. It's always been if I could work with others. Playing and connecting with others made me feel less alone on stage. I'm not a stand-up comedian. I need to be in connection with others. I also, as a way to supplement my income, always was teaching what I'd learned to others. So for the past 30 years, I've had one foot in business and one foot in the arts, and everything I do is to bring them both together.
So, Joe, I think what's key, and it's such a fascinating story, something I want to double click on is introvert and extrovert. How does that work? Because I know me, at times I can feel like extroverted, but at my core I'm an introvert. Like if I spend too much time, for example, I was at a conference all week and I just felt exhausted because there was networking events and meeting people at the trade booth and talking to a bunch of people, and it was just too much, and then like I needed that downshift. So for you, I guess, how did you kind of realize that you're the unique case of both, and what's that look like for you?
It can be sometimes I feel a little crazy. They're battling it out. I do have to feed the quiet part of me. I can really stress myself out and get myself sick or get myself exhausted if I don't just acknowledge I need inward time. I need to not talk. I actually had to explain to my husband, who's extrovert, that I need to go inward in order to be more present for him. I'll come in the door. I've taught a workshop all day. He'll want to run bits by me. He's a comedian and a writer. Like, I cannot. I'm the worst audience for you right now. Please, I need about an hour of nothingness.
Yeah.
That I can be present again.
Gotcha.
I feel like also it's a mix.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be 100% one or the other. My mom might be 90% introvert, 10% extrovert. I don't know. Yeah.
So, and then also, because I think a big part of this discussion too is understanding maybe clues early to kind of put you on that career path. So for you, I guess what kind of pulled you naturally into arts, into acting, and kind of that field?
I'm laughing because it's such a weird story. I went to Sonoma State University for a degree in communications.
Mm.
I thought I would get into film production. I wanted to be behind the scenes on a film. That was something that seemed super exciting to me. I was dating a magician. I went to go see him do a show in New York. His assistant hurt her foot. He came out to the audience to get me, and I had to learn a dance routine really quickly before I was sought into in front of an audience of like 300. That was so much fun. That actually made me realize, oh, I actually love being on stage. However, I didn't think it was a living at all. It was just something that was purely fun.
Mm-hmm.
That led me down a whole path of, oh, if I'm going to do this and actually want some stage, I better get some training. That led me to improvisation. My acting teacher in San Francisco said, every actor should know how to improvise because you need to go with whatever is happening. You control nothing.
Yeah.
I signed up for an improv class. At the same time, I was working at the San Francisco Bay Club, and I was in charge of employee development and training. They wanted me to make a film so that all new employees were shown this, basically how to treat customers kind of film. I was taking improv training. I thought, you know what they actually need? Every new employee in every department should take improv because it is the perfect training for hospitality. Your whole job is connecting with the client, making them look good, yes-anding. All the qualities that someone would need in hospitality are actually fundamental improv tools. From there, that was 1993, and I have been doing that since, is bringing improv training into companies that I work with. I don't know if I actually answered your question, though.
No.
Me.
No. And I think what you're bringing up to is something that I wanted to get into, which was improv. I remember one time I did an improv class,
Mm-hmm.
and it was I feel really helpful as a communication tool.
Mm-hmm.
And also something I learned in that improv class, and I don't know where I'm taking this question, but I think it's a key nugget. We did this exercise where you had to pass the ball and you had to add to the story. I can't remember exactly the nature, but then they asked the question after we all went around, okay, who do you remember? And what we've realized is the person next to you, aka the person who went before you and maybe the person before, you totally zoned them out because you were busy thinking about, what am I gonna say? And for me, I'm going down a tangent here, but that was such a important communication unlock for me, which is because I find that a lot of people stress out and have anxiety when it comes to communication.
Yeah.
And what I tell folks is, honestly, they're not really thinking about you that much.
Right.
I mean, I know that might sound weird, but to me, that was freeing, knowing that even if I go out there and do mediocre, bad, unless I just like totally bomb it, that's different. But no one's thinking about like what you said. So why not lead more into value? And it was weird that exercise unlocked that for me. And I guess my question to you, I guess, is broad question here. But when you work with people on, okay, I want to work with this future leader, maybe CEO, because you work with people, top athletes, CEOs, kind of what's the one thing that most of them have wrong, or maybe one critique that you see similar patterns for people who struggle with communication?
It ties perfectly to what you were talking about with your improv training. Early improv, you learn that your job is to make your partner look good. It's not about you looking good, it's about your partner. You do that by taking them in, listening, adding to what they just said. That goes to, as well as what I lean on when my introverted self is fighting me. If I'm nervous backstage before a keynote or a workshop I'm leading, then I know I'm not thinking, my thinking's messed up. I'm thinking about myself, how I'm about to do, what I'm about to say, what's my opening line. That's all the wrong focus. All I need to do is like, oh, what am I here for? I am here for them. I am here to share something, transfer something that I know to them. I'm here to be of service to my listener's mind. That calms my nervous system down really fast. For the workshop I did for you guys, of course I was nervous at first till I remembered, oh, I'm here. I'm here to share. What they do with the information or not is, I can't control that, but I do have a lot to share, so let me share it.
Yeah.
That really helps my introvert self. I think that the best CEOs or the best athletes, they're all there to be of service rather than thinking about themselves. There's a generosity and openness, a curiosity that is bigger than just that small moment. I think when people are making a mistake is when they're focusing on themselves or thinking it's about themselves.
So if someone's listening to this today, and let's just say they have a presentation in a week and they're really nervous about it, what would your kind of, if I could do, maybe it's 3 things or 2, but if you were to provide tips to that person to try to get the most out of that thing they're scared for, or they're scared about giving this presentation, maybe they feel pressure because, it's a big audience. What kind of tips would you provide in addition to kind of that value mindset to get them on the right path, so that maybe they'll listen to this and feel a little easier after listening to these tips?
If I had time with them, what I would say, let me take it back. Usually when an executive meets me for coaching, they're focused on their content. They have probably 10 to 20 slides. They're all focused on what they're going to say. The anxiety comes from fear of forgetting what they want to say. That's huge. Which then, because that becomes most of the focus, their energy dips down. They become an altered version of themselves. I understand that content is important, but it is not all it is. For a listener, it is always voice first, words second, face first, words second. For the one speaking, they think it's words first, words the most important. There's so much else for the listener, just technically, what they're focusing on. So ideally, it all matches up. They call that congruence or authentic. One, I would have to, so someone came to me, they were worrying about themselves or the forgetting of the content. We would start there. What I would need to know from them before we could really start working is, based on your talk, I'd ask, how long do you have? They might say, I've got 10 minutes, whatever that is. What would be, in your world, what would be a length of time someone would be speaking?
I think that's a good, let's say 15 minutes. Usually that's kind of the window, is 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. So you've got your listener's mind for 15 minutes. And I would need to ask him, okay, what's your E? At the end of your 15 minutes, what do you want your audience or listeners to believe? And we'd suss that out. And what action do you want them to take? So I'd have to write it down so I'd have some sort of scaffolding in order to coach them. Then, and normally they know, they've got some ideas or we can suss that out. The next step is really important. Okay, the B, where is your listener's mind most likely starting at the beginning of your talk? What is their point of view on your topic? Sometimes I'm talking to leadership and this other, they've got like 2 opposing points of view. So then we have to talk about whose mind do you want to address first. But let's say it's an audience of 200. So there's various points of view and I write them all down. It could be 10 different things. Also, how long have they been sitting? Where are you in this whole thing? It's important. How long have they been sitting? What are they thinking about? But we write these things down. So what's their B? What's their point of view on your topic before you start to talk? Because the best openings are about the listener, not about what you want to say. So there's always a nugget in that B that you want to address right away. And it's an act of respect to go, let me start where your mind is starting. That way I can relax your nervous system. I know we're all connected. And then I can take your mind respectfully on a journey to get to my E. What's interesting, let's say they've come with 10 slides, there's an overarching B and E, beginning and end for the talk, but each slide has its own mini E and B. What usually happens, they realize, oh, they don't need to know that. Yes, that's part of my script, but that's just what I know. They don't need to know that. Becomes this great editor as you realize I am respectfully taking their mind on a journey to where I want it to be.
And I want to make sure that our listeners hear that E and B. So what does E stand for and B stand for?
So E is the end, where you want your listener's mind to be at the end of your talk. Okay. So what you want them to believe or what action you want them to take. The B is where their mind is beginning before you start talking. Which, let's say you follow someone, it's always really helpful to know, because the person who spoke to them before is like handing you their mind. Oh, where are they landing that you're picking up from? Or are you totally changing? It's really helpful information to know.
Yeah, I wrote down so many notes there, and something I wanted to pick your brain on. Mm-hmm. And I believe you did it a little bit in your presentation. I had to leave early. Mm-hmm. But something I find that great speakers have in common is they make things relatable. Mm. Meaning, even if I'm presenting data or I'm presenting stuff that is very, on the surface can seem complicated. But I noticed that even the best speakers who are speaking about things that might be, over someone's head or very factual and data driven, mm-hmm. they find a way to make it relatable or find everyday examples that other people can relate to so that they can absorb that information. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, is that something that you witness and that you recommend to others? And how do you go about maybe adding that little level of relatability to someone's communication?
For adult learners, something experiential is key. It was so challenging. I normally do my speaking workshops are a group of 10 for 2 entire days. I then was challenged, how about we give you 3 hours and a group of 80? It's like, wow. All right, what can I do? I knew what I need to deliver. I also knew it needed to be broken up enough where I could give, here's a little information, now go practice it with a partner. Then come back, here's a little bit more. I just feel I need that the way I learned, so I can't imagine not doing it that way. Otherwise, you're just sharing information and no one's able to grasp it. For the E and the B that I was saying earlier, that can be used in every single conversation you have. Let's say I was in a sales team and I'm talking to one person. I still know probably where I want the client to be at the end of the talk. I'd also want to be respectful and find out where are they starting, what's happening with their company. Mm-hmm. So we're doing that E and the B almost all the time. We're definitely doing it as kids, I have to say. I remember perfectly, if I wanted to spend the night at a friend's house, which parent am I going to ask? Who will say yes? It was always my mom. Definitely mom first. Then I'd have to think, oh, why would she say no? What she might be worried about that would make her say no. I remember going, hey, I want to spend the night at Kay's house. I promise we'll go to sleep early and I won't be tired at church tomorrow. You're spewing it all out, hoping to. So even as children, we knew a little bit about trying to influence someone's mind and get them to say the yes we want them to say.
It's almost like, since you work in film too, it's like putting together a good documentary. Mm-hmm. Like the great documentaries, at least the ones I watch, that don't seem biased. They'll present kind of their argument, so to speak. But they'll also present the counter argument, and they'll do so in a way so I almost feel that applies too to putting together the communication and everything that you're saying now, don't you think?
Yeah. I noticed too that humor is so great. I feel like even though I teach in a corporate setting, we laugh a lot. There's something, we don't need to take ourselves so seriously. You can take the work seriously, but not yourself too seriously. So humor is really great. Being open, I'm constantly challenged by clients. Sometimes I'm challenged because I've bumped up against something that they're feeling insecure or defensive about.
Mhm.
We get to work through that. Sometimes they'll give me something I've never seen before or dealt with. So I get to learn. If I don't have the answers, I can say, you know what? Let me marinate. I don't know the answer to that right now.
Yeah.
And come back with that. So I don't have to know everything. How great to be able to say, I don't know, let me find out for you, or that was a mistake.
Yeah,
I-
absolutely.
Either way, there's some sort of relief. Like, okay, let me reset.
Yeah, for
Mhm,
sure.
mhm,
And I want to come back to something I circled too, which is where they are at the beginning.
mhm.
So if I am just curious to know, how does a communication prep look like on that point if I'm doing middle of the afternoon per se
Mhm.
versus I'm leading off at 9 a.m.?
Afternoons are interesting. One is figuring out your own energy. There
Yeah.
can be a whole thing. If I know they've been sitting for a while or if they've just had lunch, in my back pocket, I have several things that I can have the group do just for even 30 seconds or a minute to raise the energy. Anyone can do that. There's so many ideas. You can have them do the wave. You could, I mean, there's so many things. If you just literally need them, I just need them to get up and laughing for a moment. There's so many different things you can do that people will be silly. At the beginning of a corporate improv class, we'll have people do the circus bow. Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does.
Yeah, where you just say I failed with big smile on your face and everyone standing and saying I failed, but with huge smiles and laughing. You're trying to cut the tension in the room so you can get down to work.
Yeah.
At the beginning, if you're the opener, then you're dealing with kind of a similar thing of needing to wake people up. You want to, if the room is feeling either tired or disconnected, your job is to connect them right at the beginning,
Yeah.
physically and with focus, because you don't want to hand a bunch of sleepy, disconnected people to the person after you.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and something I've tried to workshop and improvise myself when I communicate to a group
Mhm.
is I always recommend, to your point, trying to get them involved early. 'Cause
Mhm.
that does two things. One, to your point, that gets them engaged, wakes them up. But two, it also gets me out of my own vicious cycle, anxiety head of what if I mess up? What if I? Like automatically, it almost feels more conversational.
Yes.
But something I need to find a counter to is sometimes I'll act an open-ended question, but no one's responding.
Mm. Yes.
Right? So
You
that's effective when you have an engaged group,
yeah.
but you almost need to be ready to pivot or maybe have a few people ready to speak, or maybe you do it in exercises. I don't know. But I'm just basically what I'm saying is I agree with your point. The more that you can engage early,
Mhm.
the better for the audience, but also the better for you and your nervous system.
Yeah. I prefer, if I can, while people are entering and I'm the one leading the workshop or speaking, to be amongst the peoples, meeting them, saying hello.
Mhm.
There are times where it's a keynote and you are backstage, mic'd up, hearing the people come in. That's a whole level of stress. I do try to peek through a curtain just so I can already put myself in the space before it even begins, which goes to another thing when I'm coaching CEOs and they have a dress rehearsal, wear your show shoes. That's one thing. What are you going to be wearing day of? You
Mm.
want to hear what they sound like on the stage. I've walked in the squeakiest shoes ever.
Yeah.
Thinking, why am I wearing these squeaky shoes? Or you realize they're just so different, and all of a sudden you're nervous and your shoes feel weird. Whatever you can do to be in the space psychologically as well as physically, so it's yours and you're the host inviting people in.
Absolutely. And I'm
Mhm,
curious to know from your perspective and all the people that you've worked with,
mhm,
does the level of prep depend on the individual?
mhm,
Because I say that because my prep has changed throughout the year. When I first started doing public speaking or speaking to a team, I
mhm,
would prep a lot.
mhm,
And sometimes when I over prep, it would do okay.
mhm.
But kind of eventually someone said to me, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, but they go, I either know what I'm talking about or I don't. And basically they put together like a high level outline,
Mhm.
And that's kind of what works for me. Like I used to prep a lot. I've heard people say you should practice over and over again, you should record. But by doing so, I don't know, I just feel naturally more nervous. And
Mhm.
that actually would manifest itself in the presentation where I would pre-rehearse certain lines and it came off almost robotic, right?
Right.
Versus speaking organically. So
Mhm.
long-winded way of asking the question of, I guess, for you, how do you advise different personalities? Is there such a thing as far as amount of prep time for one individual versus another?
That's a good question. I'll start with myself. For me, when I'm doing the 2-day training, I know where I'm taking people. I know timing wise where I'd like to be in each section in order to end on time. So I really start with scaffolding. I know with each section what they need to take away. From there, I'm open to what's showing up in the room.
Mm.
When I have to give a keynote, so that means it's not as back and forth, it's just me speaking, I still have the skeletal frame of where I'm going. If I'm trying to remember what I want to say, definitely my energy will be lower. I need to trust that it's in my brain, connect with people, actually looking at people in the audience and connecting, because my job is to make sure I transfer what I'm thinking through talking into their minds. So talking is a transfer. If I'm over here trying to remember, it just doesn't work. It will be robotic or not as effective.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have a lot of anxiety around their minds remembering. When I work with executives, there's a whole class I teach called Memorize Without Memorizing.
Hmm.
One of the best acting teachers I worked with, his name is Richard Side. He would not allow us to memorize our scripts in the traditional manner. This was terrifying because my first 10 years of acting, I'd done the traditional memorizing where you'd get your script, you'd highlight it, and then you'd try to just start remembering. Then you'd go through the whole phase of acting robotically. You hopefully had enough time to then make it natural at some
Yeah.
point. So there's this whole length of time you had to go through. Instead of memorizing our script, he would have us look. So you absolutely knew your lines. They'd be highlighted in your script. You would look at your partner's lines. So if you and I were in a scene together, I'd look at your line. Then I would look at mine. This is still in the exploration. And I'd have to think, what do I think that makes me say the line that I say? You say something, I must have a thought that makes me then say this line. You'd go through your script, figuring out the thoughts that preceded your line. Let's say then we turned our scripts down. We hadn't even officially memorized yet. You would say your line. I would have the thought and the line would come out. It felt like magic.
Yeah.
Our brains are doing this all the time. In fact, that's what our brains are doing right now. You're saying something to me. I think something, then I say something. It's pretty effortless. When it comes to something where it's more scripted, ideally we would work how our brains work, which are the thought precedes the line. The thought precedes the line. This works beautifully in corporate scripts.
Have you always been a good listener? Because it's something I feel like is just as important, if not more important than communication, is your ability to listen. But also to your point, sometimes in the mind, especially with certain people with so many different responsibilities, you're thinking about your kids, you're thinking about what you're doing this evening, you're thinking about your to-do list, you're thinking about the next meeting. Like so often we escape, but that by not being present, we're not a great communicator. So I guess broad question here. Number one, like, is that a skill that you've developed over the years, or have you kind of naturally been a good listener? And then two, how important is that skill of just listening and being present to being a great communicator?
So funny that you should say that because I haven't thought of this for years, but in 8th grade, I was voted best listener.
Oh, there you go.
Somewhere there's a picture with that title under my name. In improvisation, the first thing they taught us was the most important thing in improv, and they pointed to their ear, is listening. I've always known it was key. I do fight just like anyone else. I fight with focus. The more I've connected to my iPhone, I feel like the more spacey or less focused I've become. I'm really trying to get my brain back. I know I feel better. It takes energy. I feel better when I'm focused and listening, when I'm with someone else. I love to meditate, and I don't know if people say they love it. It just really helps me. So meditation and listening, I think, have been huge parts of me being able to connect and communicate. I can be very, I think I can be pretty spacey.
Yeah, because it's like what I'm picking at is a dichotomy here, or at least I can relate, because you said you're a very curious individual.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I am as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it serves me well in a lot of cases, but sometimes it allows me not to be present, because if you were to say an idea or something, if we're having a conversation and you were to say, well, there's this thing that happened, and then you would come back, my mind would start to go to, oh, Joe has this problem, and now I want my mind naturally wants to solve it or continue to pick at it. And in the process, it's like, oh, I'm gone. And the same thing is like anything I find creative, like I'm like, ooh, like that's interesting, right? So like I find that as being a curious individual, I naturally kind of lean towards problem solving, and that's interesting, whatever. But sometimes that makes me space out or not focused.
Yeah. I'm wondering if I was so drawn to improv because you have these heightened focused, that the whole thing you need to do is just be hyper focused and present. I really love that feeling. I don't think any human's designed to be that way 24 hours a day. That'd be pretty intense. Obviously, we probably wouldn't fall asleep. There's an inward part that we need to in order to fall asleep. When we were working with the Olympic ski team, we were doing an improv class with them, and it was really interesting. They thought improv was fascinating because they are taught to yes and at a heightened degree, which we needed them to explain. They were talking about when they're flying down the mountain at high speeds, they can only be in a yes and state, which means they have to be in complete acceptance of everything that is actually happening so they can use that as fuel. There can be no, maybe, or I wish this wasn't happening, because it is happening fast.
Yeah.
That always struck me of like, wow, that's a really heightened state of yes and as a way to work with reality, which ideally that's what we're all doing. I know when I'm driving, I tend to daydream. I go probably dangerously far away. When it's raining or there's some sort of crazy driving on the freeway, I even have to turn off any music or podcasts I'm listening to in order to focus. So there is something about what it takes to be present, that energy.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned like meditation. Like I'm kind of on and off. Well, I'm never off, but at my best, I'm kind of meditating every day, 10 minutes. And then there's other weeks where most weeks now I'm maybe at 2-3 times a week. But those little moments, right? And it's just an exercise. And I think most people get this wrong. They think about meditation, I need to shut my mind off. I hear that so commonly. And then once I found it's not about shutting your mind off. It's literally about just observing the traffic in your head. And by doing so, it doesn't yank you around, so that you're able to respond rather than react, right? By actively doing it over and over. So as somebody who's naturally curious and creative, it's allowed me to kind of be in that mindset more often than not, right? And I think for me, it's been a huge unlock.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. What do you have a particular style of meditation?
I do. Sometimes I do it just focusing on the breath.
Yeah.
Mindfulness meditation. And other times I'll use apps like Headspace or Calm, but usually a variation between the three.
What I loved, I've done Vipassana since about 2005. It was a very physical meditation where you're scanning your body and your breath. What I loved about it is that it was very active, which, like you said, we're never going to get our chaotic monkey mind to not do it too. So we need to give it a job give it something to do, which is focusing on the breath, counting, whatever it is, so that you can actually get a reprieve, and then it will come right back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very helpful. And then also too, yes, and I feel like that's worth double clicking, because I have found myself using that more. I know it's an improv tool, but to your point, I think it's just a leadership, and especially for people listening to this podcast who want to get better at their career, it's such a great concept, but because it allows you to stay on the curiosity point, to me at least, it allows you to lean more into curiosity instead of judgment, right? To most of the time it's no, right? Most of the time we think of reasons to kind of resist things that are hard, or lean into judgment because maybe we don't like that person, or maybe we're just not, for whatever reason. But when you try to attack it from a yes and mindset, even if you might not disagree necessarily, I feel like that opens up the window of opportunity one way or the other. What are your thoughts on yes and how can it help current leaders and future leaders as they think about their relationship and ultimately just being a good leader in the workplace?
When we've taught yes and or yes but versus yes and in a corporate environment, it's been so interesting. We'll do a round of yes but, where people get to really learn that yes but is actually no. So you get a feeling of like what that feels like, and there's very familiar in a business environment, a lot of yes butting. I'm saying yes but.
Right.
Then we have them do a round of yes and. And it's so interesting because it absolutely goes better. However, there's this interesting thing where we have to do another version of yes and, where you are literally not allowed, you are supposed to yes and something about what was just said. What happens is when people do the first round of yes and, they're yes anding the first idea. Right, great, that is better. Now you can't plan ahead, listen to what is said right before you, and yes and something in what they just said. The difference in that is the people that just experienced it feel valued. You just picked something from what I just said and added to it, rather than change it on the dime or kind of ignore that it was just said. So we use yes and not just as an additive thing, but as an act of respect. Even if I don't agree, for example, the yes and is, I heard what you just said. That's huge. I've heard it, and let me stay with your idea long enough. Let's stay with your idea longer before it gets changed into something else or totally canceled out. I think that's important as an act of respect versus, well, we can't yes and everything because there's budget or there's time constraint, etc. In the creative process, I really believe there needs to be a sacred amount of time that is a yes and generative time that's protected from budget, because the great idea might be idea 128, let's say. You never would have gotten to if everyone had been yes butting or there'd been constraints super early on. You yes and hopefully all throughout the day. A yes and that you could do simply is someone opens the door for you and you say thank you or nod. A yes and is an eye contact that from the person that just gave you coffee. There are so many ways to say I see you, I hear you. Let me give you something back. It's pretty profound.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And honestly, it's something that I need to get better at, because you're right. Even in your personal relationship, it's that validation, you know, and so often, even myself, right? Like sometimes I go into fix it mode. And when you shut your mind off and you don't have that yes and mentality, you don't have that validation, right? And I think that's such a critical piece for just relationship building, beyond just being a great communicator in the workplace. And then two, 100% agree on the creative process. Like I'm sure people listening can relate. A lot of times, some of the best ideas start from a mediocre idea or an idea where they got workshopped 3 or 4 times, or even a failure, right? But by allowing that yes and mentality, and having a creative space where all the ideas are welcome, that's usually where the magic happens. And if you're in that mindset of no and shutting down, a lot of times those ideas are suffocated, if that makes sense.
Yes. you brought up a good point too, of something around failure, that in the improv world, a lot of everything that's designed is designed to fail. That is because they want you to be agile, to be really flexible, to bounce back from it. In business, ideally, something doesn't work. We learn from it and we move on. We certainly don't want people hiding that it happened or putting blame on someone else. There's something I really admire of, I tried this, it didn't all work, but this kernel we can take.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Joe, I want to jump to a segment here we call the bigger picture, where I'm going to show a picture. It could be a quote, it could be a headline, it could be an image, and we just kind of riff. So we've kind of talked about it, but I feel like you're very passionate about acting in the arts, but also you're very passionate about teaching. So I guess if you had to pick one, or maybe you can't take this question where you want, but if you had to only pick one, what you have to stop acting, but you can keep doing communications and teach and help others that way. Or if you did just acting full time, just like I said, take this question where you want, but like, I guess, which one do you find more joy in if you had to pick between the arts and acting and teaching?
Teaching, I think for me, is the real love. It means I can work with anyone and I can do it till I die. For acting, the upper picture there, that's me, I think, in a show called Close to Home. There's so much struggle and audition and not getting it, and that was 2 minutes, that it's just not fulfilling enough. It was a fun moment. The other pictures, the one below, we're doing Jane Austen unscripted. There was a golden era of narrative improv here in Los Angeles that I hope will come back. It was about a decade of incredible people, incredible opportunities that everyone's moved on, moved away. So for me, that's also around the certain people that are no longer doing it. The picture on the right, that's my husband. He's so much fun to work with. We still work together. I feel so lucky. We do our corporate improv teaching together. That I will do as long as I can. But I think teaching for me is the most fulfilling, the most fun. I don't know what is going to be presented to me. I get to pivot. I get to bring 30 years of experience to whatever that client needs. It's unending. It's always interesting.
Yeah. And I feel maybe you feel this way because I thought maybe I have this wrong, but did you play sports growing up? Okay. So I'm seeing a correlation here between sports, arts. I get the sense you like to kind of put yourself into things where you can fully immerse yourself. Do I have that right?
Yes. Yeah.
I could relate. I just feel like that's how I was. I mean, I played basketball all growing up, and I think that's what it was. It was just creativity, but you were 100% present, right? And what I love about basketball is it's the perfect blend of team sports, but also individual.
Yes.
You have to have a role, and you have to prepare, and you need to find your role, but not at the sense of sacrificing the team. And there's just so many correlations there. But I just get the sense of like you're someone who just fully immerses themselves in the things. And I guess the second part of this question would be, because a lot of people talk about passion, or how do I find what I like, as people are trying to think about navigating their career and finding their next step. I feel like you were lucky in some sense from that gathering that you kind of found that early. But what advice would you give to people of them saying, I'm not passionate about my job, or I want to find something I'm passionate about? Kind of how would you advise people on finding their passion or something they enjoy doing to make a living?
That is so interesting. Let me think about that for a moment. You know what I wanted to do up until I was a junior? I wanted to be an interior decorator.
Oh.
Was an offshoot. I subscribed to interior design magazines starting in 5th grade. I thought that's what I wanted to do until a cousin who was an interior decorator visited And she told me she hated her job because you had to decorate people's homes how they liked it. I was horrified. Oh, that's not great. Hadn't thought of it before then. From there, to me, it was like following the breadcrumbs. I knew I loved to read. I loved to write. I took a communications course in early college. That teacher was so fantastic. I thought, oh, you can get a degree in this. That led to, like, one thing led to another, but I was always led by an energy inside me that just seemed, boy, it's really hard to explain, an internal fire. You just know when you enjoy something or are drawn to something. I do have an organized part of myself. I thought for a while, maybe I'll be an organizer because I love to organize chaos.
Yeah. You could help me out then. That's for sure.
It's so interesting. Looking back, I feel like I've just always followed a thread. If I did think about the hospitality industry, I thought maybe that. I love working with people. I love travel. Maybe that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm giving really great advice because it's having an internal compass that you trust, and you just keep having it lead you closer and closer toward what you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I love what you said there, following the breadcrumbs. And also too, for me, I think where your energy is, to the earlier conversation about introvert, extrovert, like when you do the task, or, to your point about hospitality, if you work in the hospitality industry, you naturally want to serve people.
Yeah.
And you naturally have to do that out of a genuine place. And that's not for everybody. But if you feel energized in that kind of space, then probably the hospitality industry is for you. So I think that's perfect advice, is the breadcrumbs and then kind of the clues in your past of what gives you energy. And ultimately, I think you'll find something there. And then also I want to talk about this second slide. And this is from an article that you wrote. And it was The Artful No and No.
Yeah.
And I wanted to double click because I found it so fascinating. And 2 lines you wrote in this article you wrote. You said, know that no can leave space for a yes. And then you also said, instead of no making my life smaller, I have a gut feeling that trusting the knowing that equals a no is making my life fuller. And I found this so fascinating because, once again, for this platform, I find that you're usually younger in your career, you say yes to, this is where I can relate to what you were saying. You say yes to a lot more. And then as you get older, I have 4 kids now and my responsibilities are great. I find myself naturally wanting to lean to no. So question to you is advice for people, when to say yes, when to say no, because by every time you say no, you might be shutting yourself down to a potential opportunity.
Yes.
But also every time you say yes, you're also closing the window on another potential opportunity, right? So it's kind of this weird balance or situation. So kind of double click a little bit on what you were writing in this article and how people should go weighing decisions.
Boy, I think this came out of my understanding, once the pandemic hit, everything slowed down in such a way that was out of our control. I didn't realize how full and chaotic my life had been before the pandemic, with travel, international travel, teaching at night. I look back at 2019, I'm amazed I survived it. 2020 was a great reset. It was scary for my business. All of a sudden, all the work went away and we were pivoting virtually. There was this great clearing of the decks as we started coming back to real life and in person. I wanted to be really thoughtful about what I put in place. There was this great opportunity for a reset. So what was I going to do with this opportunity? I started noticing that saying yes when it was fear of missing out, I usually would be pretty grumpy. It was based on the kind of the wrong criteria. There is that interesting thing. I get an opportunity. If I want to say no, I have to sit with it. So I'm trying not to respond immediately. If I'm saying no because I'm scared or nervous, then I'll probably lean toward, I should probably do it. If I'm Or am I saying no because it's not right for me? I've moved on or something has changed. I just feel like that kind of bringing back to meditation, that moment before we knee jerk say yes or no. What is right for me? And if I've been too busy or scattered, it's just really hard to figure it out because I'm off balance.
Yeah. I feel like that's such an insightful thing for people to do, because I love that right there, where it's like, if you're scared, maybe you should do it, right? Because maybe it's not, so it's just so much the nervous energy coming out, but a lot of times you say yes, that's actually where growth happens. But to your point, sitting with it, really dissecting where that no's coming from, the root cause, so to speak, of the no. And then at the end of the day, trusting your intuition and your gut to make, if it is no, then it is a no. So I think I love that.
It's interesting too with yes. There are times where I've said yes to things. I'm looking at my calendar going, who did this? Oh, I did that to myself. I am having to block off days where I don't, I'm so bad at this. There can be a day off and suddenly I'm having coffee with a friend or lunch with someone else. There's a dinner. I'm trying to catch up. Then I'm grumpy because what I really need to do is slow down, nest, maybe do nothing. I'm really trying to take a pause before. So when I'm saying yes, I'm all in. Either I'm totally yes, let's do that dinner. Let me be of service to my friends. Let me connect. Or you know what? A month from now. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Not to overschedule ourselves out of guilt.
Yeah. And I find what you're saying too, I tend to find, I feel this way, that anxiety and distraction are highly correlated.
Yeah.
Meaning if I'm constantly go, 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 distraction, to your point, technology makes it so easy now, where if you just want to escape, you just pick up your phone, mindlessly scroll Instagram or social or some funny video. And like, we can now distract ourselves 24/7.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, that's going to come back and bite you. So to take those, call it meditation, call moments of quiet, call it whatever you need, but those little pauses help clear your head. And even though you might have a little anxiety or some feelings you don't want to deal with, I find that trying to get back to that baseline just helps make you a better decision maker, going forward.
Yeah. I have way more anxiety than I knew that I had.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize it. It shows up differently for each person.
Right.
I have found that having much better boundaries with my iPhone is helping me across the board. I took email off my iPhone. I don't need to check email for my job. I don't need to check it all the time. Some other people might need to be on call or check on the weekends, but I had to take Instagram off my phone. I don't want to be staring at my phone. I'm trying to buy real books again. Oh, it's so funny though. They don't light up at night. Like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I'm like, oh, I need a book light. There's all these little things that we can do, identifying anxiety in ourselves, and then various ways of how we can cope with it. I know I'm a better person to everyone around me if I work out first thing in the morning, get exercise.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, for people listening out there, if you feel like you're go, 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 I think what you're saying there, this helps people make better decisions. It's not that you can't say no, but just maybe sit with it, take a pause. And I think that'll help you in so many ways. Joe, thank you for doing the podcast. I have a couple final questions here, more quick in nature, but going back to the communications thing, you've been in communications for over 30 years, but I guess, have you ever had a flop or is there, when I say that, is there at least one that comes top of mind? But looking back, it was really fundamental for you because you learned from it. Is there a story like that, like a communication, just one of those ones that like, oh, that happened to Joe?
Oh my gosh, this is so painful. I will not say the year. I was given an opportunity with a friend to do a keynote. 10 years earlier, we had been at the same company. We had done an improv-based keynote with a group of 4, huge hit for the company. 10 years later, they want us back. We've changed our Our approach, we write it out very carefully. It was more about mindfulness and improv, not comedy and improv. I don't think the woman hosting read it. She showed up in a clown outfit. I was like, this is so strange. This is not at all. She was like, this is going to be fun. I'm like, actually, it's on mindfulness. It's not going to be fun. So she goes on stage and this huge clown introducing us. As we're talking, people are leaving. It was so painful. I'm whole body cringing right now. It was so painful. I would wake up in the night and sweating, thinking about it was like that bad dream.
Yeah.
It was real. What I learned from that, it took way long. I learned I didn't know a lot. It was just something I never wanted to revisit. I'm not sure what we could have done better, except for not to have done it at all. I do know that this probably is similar. You're given opportunities sometimes before you're ready. I mean, you can only learn and move on, but was so painful. It is really painful when people are leaving your keynote and you're seeing them head to the exits. That's not a good keynote.
But I'm glad you're sharing that, because I mean, even someone like you who's done this at the highest level, right? And worked with some of the best minds in business and athletes, but even you, right? Or you've had those kind of instances where, well, maybe looking back, I wish it happened differently, but nonetheless it happened. But look at you keep moving forward and keep getting better.
Just quickly, who is a great example of that? There's a skier. Oh my gosh. We worked with her after this one event, and she was at the Olympics. I think it was Lindsey Vonn. She was just nearing the end, but for the photographer, she did some sort of leap in the air, then fell, and instead of getting the gold, she got the silver. We worked, now that's huge global audience. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
We worked with her. She had the best attitude. It was like it had never happened. That was not someone rolling up and feeling shame. Whatever she processed, she let it go. She moved on. She's a huge inspiration to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't let your failures define you.
Right. Absolutely. And I could feel like in that story, you telling it, you still have it there, but once again, like you just learn from it and move on and keep moving forward.
Yes.
I know you're a reader. You said that you like to read. So is there a favorite book that you like to gift others?
Ooh. No, I should give books.
Is there a book that, as I asked that question, if you were to, just a book that's a favorite of yours that you feel like would serve people one way or the other, what would that book be?
This may be a strange thing to say, but it's something I just pulled off the bookshelf and am rereading. It's a book called It Didn't Start With You. I found it fascinating, the case studies of inherited ancestral trauma, what we inherited that isn't ours, that might be coming from our families of origin. Found it fascinating. I don't know a lot about it, but that to me is a page turner. It didn't start with you.
I like that. I wrote that down. It didn't start with you. Two last questions here, Joe. Advice to your younger self. So you first started your career, if you go back to that person, what words of advice would you give to that young Joe?
I would tell young Joe, ask for help. I think I've tried to take it all on and figure it out for myself my whole life. I would have let on, I need help. I would have been more explicit in my request.
I'm curious, has that shown up in kind of like your relationships where maybe you find yourself wanting to mentor people, or if someone asks for advice, you always want to give just because maybe you didn't get it or didn't ask for it when you were younger?
Yeah, maybe so. I definitely have a lot of surrogate children, surrogate, so many mentees. Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah. And then on that perfectly ties to the last question we asked everybody on this platform, which is, if someone were to ask Joe, hey, Joe, 3 tips if I want to take my career to the next level, whatever that career is, whatever their passion is, but 3 general words of advice or tips for that person to go to the next level of their career, what would those 3 tips be for you?
One thing that came to mind when I was working at the San Francisco Bay Club, I started at the front desk. I was already looking like, what's the right department for me? I found the job that I knew I would crush. That's for me. I made it my business to get it. It required creativity and putting myself out there and making it really clear. I'm perfect for this job. Was not subtle. And so I think just making it super clear. Gosh. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else I would recommend. I would say for the different jobs I've had that went really well, and I look back at what I did, I gave 110%. I was just like fully in it, doing it to the fullness of my ability. Even if it wasn't my dream job, it led to the next thing that was more suited to me. So that's not 3, but those are the 2 things that come to my mind.
Yeah, and absolutely on both of those, but on that second one, when you give 100% or 110%, people see it, and naturally it leads to new things that maybe are not on your horizon or your maybe career path the way you envision it. But when you add value, naturally opportunities open up one way or the other that you can't see. I think there's a quote by Steve Jobs. It's like, essentially, like, we can't count the dots on the way up. They only make sense looking back.
That's right? So true. Yes.
Yeah.
This was not a straight line for sure.
Well, Joe, you have an awesome career journey. Thanks for sharing with us for the past hour. I found this super beneficial. I know our audience will. But thanks again for doing the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome, Joe. Have a good day.
You too.
Check out more episodes at thenextlevelcareers.com.